An abandoned mail-order bride sat on a crate at the station, unaware a rich rancher was coming. The snow blows across the empty depot. A young bride waits, clutching her bag, her groom never arriving. The town whispers, smirking at her shame. But then hooves thunder. A wealthy rancher steps off the train, and everything changes. He shields her from the crowd, offering hope where there was none. Yet beneath the lamplight lies a darker truth. The banker wants the ranch water. Men ride to sabotage the land, and rumors threaten to destroy the only shelter she's ever known. She was left once already. Will she be cast aside again? Or will this chance meeting at the station become the beginning of redemption? When faith collides with betrayal and honor stands against greed, what will happen when a woman with nothing left to lose becomes the only one who can save it all? Comment below and tell me where in the world you're joining from. And if this story made you pause for a moment, hit that subscribe button for more. Winter wind whistled through the gaps in the station's wooden walls as Kisha Whitfield huddled deeper into her worn wool coat. Her carpet bag, containing everything she owned in this world, sat beside the wooden crate she claimed as her seat. The Colorado mountains loomed dark against the evening sky, their peaks disappearing into low-hanging clouds that threatened snowdrop the steam from the locomotive billowed across the platform, creating ghostly shapes in the gathering dusk. Keisha watched as other passengers greeted waiting family members, their happy reunions making her heart ache. Each face she scanned wasn't Thomas Marshall, the man who'd promised to make her his wife. All passengers cleared. The conductor's voice rang out sharp and final. The station's clock showed 6:15. Thomas had written he'd meet her on the 4 o'clock train. That had been the 4 o'clock train. Kisha pulled out his last letter, though she'd memorized every word. The paper had worn thin at the creases from her many readings during the long journey from Missouri. "I'll be there waiting," he'd written. Look for the tall fellow in the brown hat with the green band. No such man had appeared. The depot master, a thin man with gray whiskers, swept the platform for the third time, his broom scratching against the wooden planks. Each pass brought him closer to where she sat. The look he gave her mixed pity with something else. She'd seen that expression before, back home after James Turner had, but no, she wouldn't think about that betrayal now. Station's closing soon. "Miss," the depot master said, pausing in his sweeping. "You got somewhere to go?" Kisha straightened her spine, though her voice wavered. "I'm waiting for Mr. Thomas Marshall. He's surely just delayed." Two women passing by with market baskets slowed their pace, exchanging knowing looks. The younger one whispered something that made them both titter behind gloved hands. Their boots clicked across the platform as they hurried away, but their words carried back clearly enough. Another fool bride. Heat rushed to Kisha's cheeks. She'd heard rumors of men who advertised for wives with no intention of marriage, but Thomas's letters had seemed so sincere. They'd exchanged photographs. He'd written of his ranch, his dreams of family, his faith in God's plan. Had it all been lies? The depot master leaned on his broom. "Marshall, you say?" He scratched his chin. "Ain't that name hereabouts, and I know most everybody in these parts." The cold that seeped into Kisha's bones had nothing to do with the winter air. She'd spent her last dollars on the train ticket, believing Thomas's promise to reimburse her travel costs. The little money she'd saved for her dowry, her future, had disappeared with James Turner's theft back in Missouri. She had nothing left for a hotel room, not even enough for a hot meal. Perhaps Perhaps there's been some mistake, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Might you direct me to the nearest boarding house?" "I'm sure I can arrange something temporary until Mrs. Tanner's boarding house is full up with the railway crews." The depot master interrupted. "Hotel's $3 a night. If you've got it." His eyes flicked to her threadbare coat and patched boots. Kisha's fingers twisted in her lap. I haven't got $3. More townspeople passed by, their curious stares burning into her. A group of young men lounged against the station wall, making no effort to hide their amusement at her situation. One elbowed his friend, jerking his head in her direction. "Reckon that makes 3 this month," he said loudly. These mail-order brides never learn. Kisha bowed her head, her cheeks flaming. The shame of it all threatened to overwhelm her, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. Not where they could see Dot, the depot master, sighed. Listen, miss. There's a mission house over by. No. Kisha cut in quickly. She couldn't bear the thought of being another charity case, another object of pity and gossip. Thank you, but I'll wait. He'll come. There must be an explanation. The man shook his head but didn't argue. He disappeared into the station office, emerging moments later with a lantern. The flame inside cast weak light against the growing darkness. He hung it on a hook near where she sat. Station closes at 8, he said gruffly. Can't have you staying inside, but I'll leave this lit for a spell. Mind you don't let it burn dry. Kisha nodded, grateful for this small kindness. Thank you, sir. As the depot master walked away, Kisha pulled her Bible from her carpet bag. The familiar leather binding offered comfort as she opened to the Book of Psalms. The pages crinkled in the cold air as she read by lantern light. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him will I trust. The words blurred as tears threatened, but she blinked them back. The last train whistle echoed mournfully in the distance as darkness settled over the little Colorado station. Around her, the town's windows began to glow with lamplight, each one a reminder of the warm hearth and family she'd hoped to find here. A few snowflakes began to drift down, melting as they hit the platform. Kisha tucked her feet up onto the crate, trying to keep boots dry. The carpet bag held one change of clothes, her mother's silver thimble, and the quilt she'd sewn for her marriage bed. No food, no money, no prospects. Lord, she whispered, her breath visible in the cold air. I don't understand your plan, but I'm trying to trust. Please. Please don't let me be forsaken here. The station clock ticked loudly in the quiet 7:30. Soon the depot master would extinguish the interior lamps. The lantern beside her flickered as a gust of wind swept the platform, and Kisha huddled deeper into her coat. She could feel the stares of passers-by, hear their whispered comments. Each one struck like a physical blow. Poor thing. Foolish girl. Ought to know better. Just like that last one. Some part of her had known this might happen. After James. Turner's betrayal in Missouri, his theft of her savings, and his cruel laughter when she discovered his existing wife, she should have been more cautious. But Thomas's letters had seemed different. He'd spoken of his faith, his loneliness, his desire for a true partnership. Had she been desperate enough to see sincerity where there was only calculation? The depot master emerged one last time, keys jangling. Miss, his voice was gentler now. It's closing time. Sure you won't reconsider the mission house. It's not but 3 streets over, and Sister Mary Frances. I'm much obliged. Kisha interrupted softly. But I'll stay a while longer. Perhaps he was delayed by business. Or the weather. The excuses sounded hollow even to her own ears. He hesitated, then nodded. Suit yourself. But don't you freeze out here. Mission House stays open late on account of the winter weather. With that, he locked the station door and trudged away through the gathering snow. Kisha opened her Bible again, though it was getting too dark to read. She didn't need to see the words to recite them. Yeah, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, ... double quotes the lantern sputtered, its oil running low. Soon it would die completely, leaving her alone in the dark with her prayers and her shame. But still she sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap, watching the empty street as snow began to coat the platform in white. She was 23 years old, alone in a strange town, with no money and no prospects. But she was Kisha Whitfield, and she wouldn't let them see her break. Whatever came next, she would face it with dignity. Even if dignity was all she had left. The last whistle of the day echoed from the rail yard, long and lonely in the winter night. Kisha closed her eyes, her silent prayers rising with the steam into the darkening Colorado sky. The lantern's flame danced weakly as another. The UST swept across the platform. Kisha pulled her coat tighter, the worn fabric offering little warmth against the biting wind. The last passengers from the evening train filed past, their faces turned away from her obvious shame. Heavy boots thudded on the wooden platform, different from the quick steps of the townspeople. A tall figure emerged from the shadows of the station, his broad shoulders wrapped in a fine wool coat. The man paused, taking in the scene, the dying lantern, the huddled woman, the group of young men still lounging nearby with their crude remarks. Evening. McGraw, one of the loiterers, called out. Come to see the show? Another mail-order bride left waiting. The tall man's jaw tightened. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair touched with silver at the temples. His eyes, keen and measuring, settled on Keisha, without acknowledging the youth's comment. He approached her crate with deliberate steps. Ma'am. He tipped his hat, his voice carrying a quiet authority that made the snickering youth fall silent. Might I inquire your name? Keisha straightened her spine, though her fingers trembled where they gripped her Bible. Keisha Whitfield, sir. A particularly loud guffaw from the onlookers made her flinch. The man McGraw turned slowly, fixing the group with a look that had them shuffling their feet. Don't you boys have somewhere else to be? It wasn't really a question. They muttered excuses and drifted away, leaving only the sound of wind and the distant church bell marking the hour. McGraw returned his attention to Keisha. I'm Silas McGraw. He studied her face, noting the pride in her bearing despite her circumstances. Forgive my tardiness, cousin. The banking business took longer than expected. Keisha's eyes widened slightly at the word cousin, but she caught the subtle nod he gave her. Understanding bloomed, he was offering her a shield of respectability. No matter, she managed, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I'm just grateful you've come. Silas extended his arm. Let me carry your bag. You must be hungry after your journey. The remaining townspeople on the platform stopped to stare as Silas McGraw, one of the territory's most prominent ranchers, escorted the abandoned bride toward the hotel. Keisha heard their whispers shift from mockery to speculation. Now they saw her differently, not as an object of ridicule, but as someone who belonged to someone. The hotel dining room glowed with warmth and lamplight. Silas led her to a corner table, well away from curious eyes. A waitress hurried over, her manner notably more respectful than the treatment Keisha had received at the station. Evening, Mr. McGraw. Your usual table? Thank you, Sarah. And please bring us 2 cups of hot coffee right away. He helped Keisha remove her coat before taking his own seat. The roast beef tonight, is it fresh? Yes, sir. Just carved. 2 plates then. With all the fixings. The waitress bustled away, and Keisha found herself studying her unexpected benefactor. Silas McGraw's face was weathered by sun and wind, but his clothes spoke of prosperity, good wool, fine leather boots, a silver watch chain. Yet there was nothing showy about him. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who had earned his position, rather than inherited it. Mr. McGraw, she began softly. I don't know how to thank you. He held up a hand. No thanks needed. Couldn't leave a lady to freeze on that platform. He paused as Sarah returned with steaming coffee cups. Though I suspect there's a story behind your presence there. Keisha wrapped her cold fingers around the hot cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. She owed him the truth. At least, I came as a mail-order bride, she said quietly, eyes on a dark liquid. Thomas Marshall was his name. We exchanged letters for months. He sent a photograph, spoke of his ranch, his faith ... double quotes. She swallowed hard. But he never came. The depot master says no one knows him. Silas's expression darkened. It's Marshall. He had your dowry sent ahead. A bitter smile touched Keisha's lips. No, there was no dowry to send. Another man back in Missouri Dash. He ... He took it, along with my trust. She took a shaky breath. I should have learned then not to be so foolish. The foolishness lies with those who abuse trust, not those who give it, Silas said firmly. The waitress returned with heaping plates of roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. Keisha's stomach cramped at the sight. She hadn't eaten since early morning. Please, Silas gestured to her plate. Eat while it's hot. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes. Through the window, Kisha could see more snow beginning to fall. The thought of having nowhere to go after this meal made her hands tremble slightly as she cut her meat. Silas said finally, "May I ask what your plans are now?" She set down her fork carefully. I haven't any plans. Or money? The train ticket took everything I had left. Pride made her add quickly, "But I'm not seeking charity. I can work. I'm skilled with a needle, good with children. Once I find employment and lodging?" Silas asked gently. "The winter nights here can kill." Kisha's shoulders slumped slightly. "The mission house, I suppose. Though the thought of being another charity case, ... There's no shame in accepting help when it's offered freely," Silas said. He seemed to be considering something as he studied her face. "The town will talk, no matter what you do. Best to give them something worth talking about." She looked up, confused by his words. "My sister Hannah lives at my ranch with her 3 children," he continued. "She's been looking for help with the household and the little ones. The position includes room and board and wages besides." He held up a hand as Keisha started to speak. "It's not charity. Hannah truly needs the help, and from what I've seen of your character this evening, you'd be doing us the favor." Kisha's heart leaped at the possibility, but caution born of experience made her hesitate. "Your sister? She wouldn't mind? A stranger coming to live in her home? Hannah's got a good heart. She understand once I explain." Something flickered in his eyes brief, perhaps, before he added, "And she trusts my judgment in these matters." The offer was more than Keisha had dared hope for honest work. A roof over her head, children to care for. Yet she had to be sure. "Mr. McGraw," she said carefully, "you've shown me great kindness tonight. But I must ask why? Why help a stranger who might bring scandal to your door?" Silas was quiet for a long moment, absently turning his coffee cup in its saucer. "My father," he said finally, "taught me that a man's character is measured not by his wealth or status, but by how he treats those in need of help." He met her eyes. "I saw a lady being mocked for trusting in good faith. Helping you is in charity, Miss Whitfield. It's simple human decency." Tears pricked at Kisha's eyes, but she blinked them back. "Then I accept, Mr. McGraw, and I promise you won't regret your trust." He nodded, satisfied. "We'll leave for the ranch tomorrow morning." "Tonight? You'll stay here at the hotel?" He held up a hand as she started to protest. "Consider it an advance on your wages, if you must. But I won't have my sister's new helper sleeping in the mission house." As they finished their meal, Kisha noticed the other diners watching them with poorly concealed interest. Tomorrow, she knew, the gossip would fly Silas McGraw, taking in the abandoned mail-order bride. But somehow, with the prospect of honest work ahead and the memory of his kindness, the thought of wagging tongues didn't sting quite so sharply. The dining room had emptied by the time Silas settled their bill. Outside, the temperature had dropped further, and fresh snowflakes danced in the yellow glow of the street lamps. Kisha pulled her thin shawl tighter, but it did little against the biting wind. "Let me walk you back to the depot," Silas offered, noting how she shivered. "We can discuss arrangements for tomorrow's journey." They walked in silence, their boots crunching on the fresh snow. The streets were nearly deserted now, with only an occasional lantern burning in shop windows. At the depot, the platform stood empty and dark, the earlier crowd of onlookers long gone. Kisha's abandoned crate remained where she'd left it, now dusted with white. Silas cleared his throat. "Miss Whitfield, I've been thinking." He watched a snowflake land on the brim of his hat. "The weather's turning worse. Sitting here until dawn wouldn't be wise." Kisha clasped her hands together, trying to warm them. "I don't mean to be a burden, Mr. McGraw. Perhaps the station master. He locks up at night," Silas interrupted gently. "And the mission house is clear across town." The wind howled between the buildings, making the depot's signs creak. Kisha's face was pale in the dim light, though she held herself straight and proud. Silas thought of his own sister, Martha. How she'd want him to act if she were ever in such straits. "I have a proposition," he said carefully. "The ranch has plenty of room. You could stay there just until you sort out your next steps. No obligations beyond that." Kisha's eyes widened. Mr. McGraw, I couldn't. The talk in town would be no worse than what they're already saying, he finished. And my sister Martha lives there with her children. Everything proper and above board. She hesitated, weighing his words against her circumstances. Another icy gust cut through her shawl, making the decision more urgent. You're certain your sister won't mind? Martha's got a good heart, Silas assured her. And she could use the help with the children, truth be told. Been saying so for months. After a long moment, Kisha nodded. Then I accept with gratitude. Though I insist on working to earn my keep. That's fair enough. Silas gestured toward the hotel. Let's get you settled for tonight. We'll leave at first light, before this snow gets any deeper. The next morning dawned gray and cold, with snow falling steadily. Silas had the wagon ready early, lined with heavy blankets and hot bricks wrapped in flannel. He helped Kisha up onto the seat, noting how little she owned, just a single cart bag and a bundle wrapped in brown paper. The journey began in silence, broken only by the creak of leather harness and the muffled thud of horse hooves in snow. The town fell away behind them, replaced by vast white fields stretching to the mountains. Occasional fence posts marked boundaries while bare trees stood like sentinels against the pale sky. It's beautiful, Kisha said softly, after they'd traveled several miles. Even in winter, Silas nodded, pleased she could see it. Wait till spring when the wildflowers carpet those hills. He pointed toward the distant slopes. The Ute people called this valley the place where earth meets sky. You know the Ute? Some. My father made peace with them years ago when he first settled here. We still trade sometimes. He adjusted the reins as they started down a slight incline. Good people, if you treat them fair. The snow continued to fall as they drove on, but the wagon was snug with its blankets and warm bricks. Keisha found herself relaxing slightly, watching the pristine landscape roll past. Here and there, deer tracks crossed their path, and once a red-tailed hawk swooped low over the field. Hunting. There's the ranch, Silas said finally, pointing to where a cluster of buildings emerged from the whiteness. Smoke rose straight up from two chimneys, and lamplight glowed in the windows despite the morning hour dot as they drew closer. Kisha could make out more details. Substantial main house built of solid logs, a large barn, and several outbuildings. Everything was neat and well maintained. Speaking of prosperity earned through hard work, a woman appeared on the front porch as they pulled up, wrapped in a thick shawl. Two children peered around her skirts, a boy of about 8 and a girl perhaps 5 years old. Silas. The woman called out. We were starting to worry with this weather. Her eyes fell on Kisha. Curiosity evident in her expression. Silas helped Keisha down from the wagon, then made quick introductions. Martha, this is Miss Kisha Whitfield. She be staying with us a while, helping out with the children and such. Miss Whitfield, my sister Martha McGraw, and her children James and Sarah. Martha's face showed surprise, but she recovered quickly. Well, coming out of this cold. The coffee's hot and there's fresh bread just out of the oven. The house was warm and welcoming, with a big stone fireplace dominating the main room. Martha shooed the children back from the door and helped Kisha remove her snow-dusted coat. Silas, take Miss Whitfield's things up to the spare room, would you? Then you can tell me what brought this blessing to our door. There was a hint of gentle scolding in her tone, suggesting she was used to her brother's occasional unexpected decisions. The children watched, Keisha with undisguised fascination as she warmed herself by the fire. Little Sarah edged closer, clutching a worn rag doll. Your dress is pretty, the girl said shyly. Even if it's wet at the bottom. Keisha smiled, her heart warming to the child's innocent observation. Thank you, Sarah. I like your doll. Does she have a name? Grace, Sarah replied, holding the doll out for inspection. Mama made her for my birthday. She has a dress just like mine. James hung back, trying to appear more grown-up than his sister, but Keisha could see his curiosity too. She recognized the look of children who'd lost a parent. She'd seen it often. Enough in the mirror after her own father died. Martha returned with coffee cups and a plate of steaming bread. Here now. This will warm you up proper. Children, Let Miss Whitfield catch her breath before you pester her with questions. Oh, I don't mind, Trisha said quickly. They're no bother at all. Martha's expression softened as she watched Keisha interact with her children. When Silas came back downstairs, she pulled them aside, speaking in low tones. Keisha couldn't hear their words, but she saw Martha's initial concern fade into something like approval. The fire crackled warmly, and the coffee was strong and sweet. Sarah had settled near Keisha's feet, showing her doll's wardrobe, while James had begun to ask careful questions about the train journey. Despite her uncertainty about what lay ahead, Keisha felt something inside her begin to unwind. Here, at least, was a chance to be useful, to belong somewhere. If only for a little while. As the morning wore on, the snow continued to fall outside the windows, but inside the McGraw home, Keisha found herself surrounded by the simple comfort of a family going about their day. Martha moved efficiently through her tasks. James helped bring in more firewood, and little Sarah chattered about her doll's adventures. It wasn't the future she'd imagined when she'd boarded that train, but perhaps, Keisha thought, it was exactly where she needed to be. Dawn painted the Colorado sky in soft pinks and golds as Keisha rose from her new bed. The spare room was simple but clean, with a patchwork quilt and crisp curtains that Martha had surely sewn herself. Through the window, fresh snow blanketed the ranch, pristine and peaceful. Keisha dressed quickly in her warmest dress, pinned her hair neatly, and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was still dark and quiet. Perfect. She could at least repay some of the McGraw's kindness with a hot breakfast. The pantry yielded flour, lard, and a slab of bacon. Soon the kitchen filled with the homey sounds of cooking, the soft patter of flour being sifted, the sizzle of meat in the cast-iron skillet, the scrape of a spoon stirring fresh coffee. Keisha worked steadily, letting the familiar routine calm her spirit. Martha's footsteps on the stairs made Keisha straighten her apron. "Good morning, Mrs. McGraw. I hope you don't mind. Land's sakes." Martha stopped in the doorway, taking in the scene. Golden biscuits cooled on the sideboard, bacon crisp on a platter, and coffee steaming in the pot. "Why, Miss Whitfield? You didn't have to. Please, call me Keisha," she said, pulling a final batch of biscuits from the oven. "And I wanted to. It's the least I can do for your hospitality." Martha's face softened. "Well, then you must call me Martha. And I must say, these biscuits look just like my mother used to make." The children clattered down next, drawn by the smells of breakfast. Sarah's eyes went wide at the feast, while James tried to sneak a piece of bacon before washing up. "Hands first," Keisha reminded him gently. "Then we'll eat proper." Silas arrived as they were settling at the table, stamping snow from his boots. "Something smells mighty fine in here. Miss Keisha made breakfast," Sarah announced proudly, as if she'd had a hand in it herself. "Even better than Mama's biscuits." Sarah Jane McGraw. Martha scolded, but her eyes crinkled with amusement. "Well, it's true," James added on a mouthful. "These are real light and fluffy." Keisha felt her cheeks warm at their praise. "My grandmother taught me her recipe. The secret's in how you handle the dough." After breakfast, Keisha insisted on helping with the morning chores. She followed Sarah to gather eggs, showing the little girl how to approach the hens gently. In the mudroom, she found James struggling with a torn shirt sleeve. "Here, let me help with that." Keisha retrieved her sewing kit from her carpet bag. "A few stitches will make it good as new. You can fix it?" James asked, watching as she threaded her needle. "Of course. I used to help in a dressmaker's shop back home." Her fingers moved swiftly, the stitches tiny and even. "There now. Just try not to catch it on any more fence posts." James grinned. "How do you know it was a fence post?" "The tier has splinters in it," she winked. "Now, what other chores need doing?" Throughout the day, Keisha found her place in the ranch's rhythm. She helped Martha with the washing, learned where everything belonged in the kitchen, and even managed to coax a smile from Silas when he came in for dinner. Supper that evening was a cheerful affair. Sarah told stories about her doll's adventures. James proudly showed off his mended shirt, and even Martha relaxed enough to share tales about her children's antics. The kitchen rang with laughter reel, Warm laughter that seemed to chase away old shadows. Silas leaned back in his chair, a contentment in his eyes that Martha hadn't seen since before his wife passed. He opened his mouth to speak, but a heavy knock at the door cut him short. The pleasant atmosphere vanished. Silas's face hardened as he rose to answer it. Wind and snow swirled in with the visitor, a tall man in an expensive coat, his face grave beneath his bowler hat. "McGraw?" The man nodded curtly. "We need to talk, Mr. Harrison." Silas's voice was carefully neutral. Coming from the cold, Martha quickly shooed the children upstairs, but Keisha remained at the table, half hidden in the lamplight shadows. The banker either didn't notice her or chose to ignore her presence. "Your note was due last week," Harrison said without preamble. "And that's not the worst of it. The water rights dispute with the Carson spread is heading to court." Silas's jaw tightened. "I told you I'd have the payment by month's end. The cattle sale won't be enough, and you know it." Harrison's voice was cold as the wind outside. "Not with legal fees on top of it. Carson's got himself a fancy Denver lawyer, claiming your father's agreement with the Utes invalidates his water claim. That agreement's been honored for 20 years. Silas growled. "My father gave his word to those people, and I aim to keep it. Noble sentiments don't pay debts, McGraw." Harrison adjusted his coat. "You've got 30 days to make good on that note, or I'll have no choice but to start foreclosure proceedings. And if Carson wins that water rights case..." He left the threat hanging. Keisha sat very still, hardly daring to breathe. The lamplight caught the strain in Silas's face, the worry in his eyes that he tried to hide. This ranch wasn't just land and buildings. It was his heritage, his sister's home, his father's legacy. She could feel the weight of it all pressing down on the room like the snow outside. "I'll have your money," Silas said firmly. "And Carson won't win." "That water agreement's legal and binding." Harrison shrugged. "We'll see. 30 days, McGraw." "Not a day more." He turned toward the door, then paused. "Shame about all this. Your father was a good man. Treated everybody fair, even the Indians. But times are changing. Might be better to sell while you can still get a decent price." The door closed behind him with a final sounding thud. Silas stood for a long moment, staring at nothing, his hands clenched at his sides. When he finally turned, he seemed surprised to see Keisha still at the table. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I didn't mean to overhear. No matter. It would be all over town soon enough." He sank heavily into a chair. "Vultures are circling, that's all." Martha came back downstairs, her face tight with worry. Silas ... double quotes. "Don't fret, sister. We'll manage." "We always have," but Keisha could hear the strain beneath his confidence. She watched as Martha squeezed his shoulder before turning to bank the fire for the night. The warmth and laughter of supper seemed very far away now. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows on the walls. Outside, the wind picked up, carrying the promise of more snow. Keisha's fingers found her grandmother's thimble in her pocket, turning it like a worry stone. She'd come here with nothing, a stranger depending on their kindness. Now, watching Silas and Martha shoulder their troubles with quiet dignity, she felt the first stirring of something deeper than gratitude. This family had taken her in, given her shelter when she had nowhere else to turn. Perhaps God had led her here for a reason, not just to find refuge, but to help this family keep theirs. The morning dawned bitter cold, frost etching delicate patterns on the window panes. Keisha pulled her shawl tighter as she joined Martha and the children for the morning water run. Each carried buckets and pails, their boots crunching through crusty snow toward the creek. "Watch your step near the bank," Martha warned, steadying Sarah, who skipped ahead. "Ice can be treacherous." The creek ran slow and dark between its partly frozen edges. James worked the pump handle while Martha and Keisha positioned their buckets. The metal handle creaked with each stroke, the sound echoing across the white-draped landscape. "It wasn't always this hard," Martha explained, her breath forming clouds. "We used to have a closer water source, but since the dispute ... double quotes," she trailed off. Adjusting her grip on a heavy bucket, Keisha looked around, taking in the vast expanse of ranch land. Despite the recent snow, she could see how the soil crumbled dry and pale beneath the white coating. The scattered patches of winter grass were sparse and yellowed. Without reliable water access, the spring cattle grazing would suffer. How many head of cattle does the ranch support? Kisha asked, hefting her own bucket. Used to be near 300, Martha replied. But we've had to sell off more than we'd like. What with the dry spells and Carson blocking the upper creek access. Her voice carried a weight heavier than the water they hauled. Sarah splashed through a puddle, sending icy water over her boots. Mama, my feet are cold. That's because you're playing instead of working, Martha scolded gently. Here, help carry this smaller pail. They made several trips, the children's complaints gradually giving way to quiet determination. Kisha's arms ached, but she matched Martha's pace. The ranch's survival depended on every drop they could store. Later that morning, Kisha accompanied Martha to town for supplies. The mercantile's bell jingled as they entered, warm air heavy with the scent of coffee and leather. While Martha discussed an order with Mr. Peterson, Kisha browsed the dry goods, making mental notes of prices. Two women by the fabric counter didn't bother to lower their voices. Did you hear about that mail-order bride staying at McCraw's place? One whispered loudly. Mighty convenient how she worked her way in there. Or Silas, the other clucked. Still grieving his Carolyn. And now this fortune hunter shows up. Martha should know better than to let her stay. Shame burned hot in Keisha's cheeks. She kept her eyes on the shelf of canned goods, but her hand trembled as she picked up a tin of peaches. Some women will do. Anything to land a wealthy rancher, the first woman continued. Even play at being stranded. Kisha set the tin down carefully. Drawing a deep breath, she lifted her chin and walked past them to join Martha at the counter. Their whispers followed like burrs catching at her skirts. Everything all right? Martha asked, noting Kisha's flushed face. Yes, ma'am, Kisha replied steadily. Just thinking about what we might need for supper. The ride home was quiet, but Martha's hand found Keisha's and squeezed it briefly. The gesture spoke volumes. That afternoon, Keisha found Silas at his desk, surrounded by ledgers and papers. His brow was furrowed as he scratched figures into a column. May I help? She offered softly, not wanting to intrude. He looked up, surprised. Bookkeeping? I kept accounts for the dressmaker's shop where I worked, she explained. Numbers have always made sense to me. Silas hesitated, then pushed the ledger toward her. Could use another set of eyes on these cattle figures. Need to know exactly what we can bring to market come spring. Kisha sat down, careful not to disturb his papers. She studied the neat columns, noting feed costs, projected weights, and market prices. After several minutes, she spoke carefully. Have you considered selling the yearlings earlier? She pointed to some calculations. If you move them before the worst of winter feeding, you'd save on hay costs. The price per head might be lower, but the overall profit could be higher. Silas leaned over to follow her reasoning. Their shoulders nearly touched as she explained her thoughts. His expression shifted from skepticism to consideration. Might work at that, he admitted. Though it goes against how we've always done things. Sometimes a fresh perspective helps, Keisha said quietly. And every penny saved is one step further from foreclosure. They worked together through the afternoon, finding small ways to trim costs and maximize returns. When Martha called them for supper, Silas's face looked lighter than it had in days. Evening settled over the ranch like a soft blanket. After the dishes were cleared, Martha brought out the family Bible. It was their custom to read together, though lately the practice had fallen away under the weight of their troubles. Would you read for us, Kisha? Martha asked, holding out the worn volume. My eyes ain't what they used to be in this lamplight. Kisha accepted the Bible carefully. The leather was smooth with years of handling, the pages marked with dried flowers and written notes in the margins. She opened to where a ribbon marked the place. God is our refuge and strength, she read, her voice clear and steady, a very present help in trouble. Therefore will not we fear, though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, ... single quotes. The familiar words filled the room like warm honey. Sarah leaned against her mother, eyes heavy with sleep. James sat straighter, his usual fidgeting stilled. Martha's hands relaxed in her lap. the worry lines around her eyes softening. Silas, watching from his chair by the fire, felt something shift in his chest. It had been too long since peace filled these walls. Too long since hope felt stronger than fear. Kisha's voice carried not just the words, but the quiet conviction behind them, faith that had sustained her through her own trials. When she finished reading, silence held them all for a moment. The fire crackled, and somewhere outside a night bird called. The day's burden seemed lighter somehow, shared among them all. "Thank you, Kisha," Martha said softly. "It's been too long since we've had a proper Bible reading. We should do it every night," Sarah declared, fighting a yawn. "Miss Kisha reads the best stories. Time for bed, young lady," Martha chuckled, rising. "James, you too. Say your good nights." As the children trudged upstairs, Kisha carefully closed the Bible and returned it to its place on the shelf. When she turned back, she found Silas watching her with an unreadable expression. "You've brought something back to this house," he said finally. "Something we'd lost along the way." "Your family has been more than kind to me," Kisha replied. "I only hope to repay that kindness in whatever way I can." Martha came back downstairs in time to hear this exchange. She looked between them, a thoughtful expression crossing her face. But she said nothing, only began banking the fire for the night. Outside, the wind had died down, leaving the world hushed under its blanket of snow. Inside, warmth lingered, not just from the fire, but from the reminder that faith and family could weather any storm. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but for now, peace reigned in the ranch house on the Colorado plain. The morning sun cast long shadows through the barn's weathered boards as Kisha climbed the ladder to the loft. Martha had mentioned they needed more space for winter storage, so Kisha volunteered to help clear out the cluttered space above the stables. Dust motes danced in the beams of light that streamed through gaps in the roof. The musty scent of old hay and leather filled her nose as she reached the top. Silas's childhood saddle sat in one corner, its leather cracked with age. Beside it, stacks of crates and boxes formed towers that threatened to topple. "Best start with those boxes in the corner," she murmured to herself. Picking her way carefully across the creaking floorboards, the first few boxes held nothing but old harnesses and rusty tools. Kisha sorted them methodically, creating piles to keep, mend, or discard. Her fingers were gray with dust when she reached a small trunk tucked beneath the eaves. Unlike the other boxes, this one was crafted of solid oak, with brass fittings gone green with age. The lid stuck fast when she tried to open it. Kisha worked the clasp gently until it gave way with a reluctant groan. Inside, beneath a moth-eaten quilt, she found stacks of papers and ledgers. Most were standard ranch documents, cattle counts, supply lists, and old receipts. But beneath them all, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, lay a bundle of letters tied with faded blue string. Kisha lifted the bundle carefully. The topmost envelope bore elegant script, though the ink had faded to brown. She unfolded the first letter, holding it close to read in the dim light. Her eyes widened as she scanned the carefully penned words. The letter, dated 18 years prior, detailed an agreement between Silas's father and Chief Running Bear of the local Ute tribe, in exchange for safe passage rights across tribal lands. The McGraws were granted access to collect water from Eagle's Spring, a source much higher in the hills than their current water supply. "Dear Lord," Kisha whispered, her hands trembling as she read further. The agreement had been witnessed by the town preacher and sealed with both signatures and the tribe's mark. She quickly leafed through the other letters. There were more documents about the water rights, correspondence between Silas's father and the tribal leaders, and even a hand-drawn map showing the spring's location. All of it proved the McGraw Ranch had legal claim to water that Carson, the banker, now insisted belonged solely to him. The creak of the barn door below startled her. "Miss Kisha?" Sarah's voice called up. "Mama wants to know if you found any empty crates yet." "I'll be right down," Kisha called back, hastily rewrapping the letters. Her heart pounded as she tucked them safely in her apron pocket. "Sarah, dear, could you fetch your Uncle Silas? Tell him I found something important in the loft." She heard Sarah's boots scampering across the barn floor. Kisha sat back on her heels, touching the letters through her apron. After all their worry about the water rights, could the answer have been here all along? Minutes later, heavy boots sounded on the ladder. Silas's broad shoulders appeared through the opening, followed by his concerned face. Sarah said you needed me? He straightened up, ducking slightly under the low beams. Everything all right? Kisha pulled the letters from her pocket with trembling fingers. I found these while cleaning, she said softly. I believe you need to see them. Silas took the bundle, frowning slightly as he untied the string. His expression changed dramatically as he read the first letter. He sank down onto an old crate, papers rustling in his suddenly unsteady hands. This is my father's writing, he said hoarsely. I remember him speaking with the Ute leaders when I was a boy. But I never knew ... double quotes. His voice trailed off as he read further. The agreement seems legally binding. Kisha ventured. It was witnessed by Preacher Thompson and signed by all parties. Silas nodded slowly. Still reading. I always said we should treat fairly with the tribe. Said they knew this land better than any of us ever would. He looked up at Kisha, hope kindling in his eyes. This changes everything. Carson's been claiming that spring water as his own, saying we have no right to it. But these letters prove otherwise. Will the town council honor such an old agreement? Kisha asked carefully. Especially one made with the tribe? Silas's jaw sat firmly. They'll have to. Preacher Thompson still leads the congregation. His signature here carries weight. And Ka was known as an honest man. No one can deny that. He gathered the letters carefully, securing them back in their oilcloth wrapping. We need better light to study these properly. Come down to the house? Kisha nodded, following him down the ladder. The afternoon sun had shifted, leaving the barn in shadow. But hope blazed brighter than any lantern as they walked quickly toward the ranch house Dot and Silas's study. They spread the letters across his desk. The lantern cast a warm glow as they pored over each document, piecing together the full story. Martha joined them, exclaiming in surprise when they explained their discovery. I remember Mr. McGraw meeting with the tribal leaders, she said, touching one of the letters reverently. He always said a man's word was his bond, whether given to white man or Indian. But I never knew he'd written it all down so careful-like. Silas traced the map with his finger. Eagle Spring feeds the whole valley. Carson's been damming it up, claiming sole rights since Pa died. But these prove we had legal access all along. He looked up at Kisha, his eyes bright with purpose. We need to bring this before the town council. With Preacher Thompson there to verify his signature, they'll have to acknowledge the agreement. What if Carson fights it? Martha worried. He's got influence with some of the council members. Then we'll fight back, Silas said firmly. Pa made an honorable agreement. It's time the truth came to light. Tisha stood quietly by the window, watching the sun sink behind the hills. The same hills where Eagle Spring flowed, its water rightfully shared between rancher and tribe according to the old agreement. She offered a silent prayer of thanks for leading her to find the letters. When will you go to town? She asked softly. Silas gathered the letters carefully. First thing tomorrow. I'll speak with Preacher Thompson before services, then request an emergency council meeting. He paused, looking at her intently. Would you come with me? You found the letters. You should be there when we present them. Keisha's heart skipped at his words, but she nodded firmly. Of course. The truth deserves all the voices it can get. That it does, Martha agreed. And it's high time some folks in town learned about keeping promises and doing right by others. They worked late into the evening, organizing the letters and preparing their case. The lantern burned low as they discussed how best to present their evidence. Outside, a coyote called in the distance, a lonely sound that echoed across the valley, where two peoples had once made a pact of trust and fair dealing. Kisha watched. Silas as he wrote careful notes, his face set with determination. The letters had given them more than just hope for saving the ranch. It uncovered a legacy of honor and justice that demanded to be upheld. Tomorrow would show whether the town was ready to hear that truth, thought as she headed upstairs to bed. The weight of the day's discovery settled over her like a warm blanket. Whatever came next, she knew they were standing on the side of right. That knowledge, like the hidden letters themselves, was worth more than gold. The evening wind rattled the shutters as Keisha pressed a cool cloth to young Thomas's forehead. Martha's son burned with fever, his small face flushed as he tossed beneath the quilts. In the lamplight, his usually bright eyes were glassy and unfocused. "Hush now," Keisha whispered, smoothing back his damp hair. "Try to rest, dear one." Martha hovered nearby, her face drawn with worry. He was fine at supper. Then the fever came on so quick-like. "Children often take ill that way," Keisha said softly, dipping the cloth in fresh water. "But they bounce back just as quick, with God's grace." In the doorway, Silas appeared, letters in hand. His brow furrowed at the sight of his nephew's condition. "How is he?" "Fevered," Martha answered, wringing her hands. "I hate to keep you both up when you need to be fresh for tomorrow's meeting." "But ... nonsense," Keisha interrupted gently. "I'll stay with him. You both need rest more than I do." Silas stepped closer, laying a gentle hand on Thomas's foot through the quilt. "You're sure?" "The council meeting will still be there at dawn," Keisha finished. "I'll manage fine." Martha squeezed her hand gratefully. "I'll bring up more cool water before I retire." As they left, Keisha settled into the chair beside Thomas's bed. The boy whimpered, caught in fevered dreams. She began to hum softly, an old hymn her mother had sung during sick nights. Through the long hours, she bathed his hot forehead, straightened his covers, and prayed quietly. Near midnight, his fever finally broke. Thomas fell into peaceful sleep, his breathing steady. Keisha sagged in her chair, exhausted but relieved. Through the window, she could see Silas's study lamp still burning as he prepared for tomorrow's confrontation. Dawn came too quickly, painting the frost-covered windows with pale light. Keisha splashed cold water on her face and changed her dress, trying to chase away her weariness. Thomas was much improved, managing a weak smile as she checked on him one last time. In the kitchen, Martha pressed hot biscuits and coffee on them both. "You need something in your stomachs for this fight," she insisted, though her own hands trembled slightly as she poured the coffee. Silas tucked the precious letters into his coat pocket, his jaw set with determination. "Ready?" he asked Keisha. She nodded, wrapping her shawl tightly against the morning chill. The wagon wheels crunched through frozen mud as they set out, the sun barely clearing the eastern hills. Neither spoke much during the ride, each lost in their own thoughts about what lay ahead. The church hall was already filling when they arrived. Sunday services wouldn't start for another hour, but word had spread about Silas McGraw's urgent meeting. Townsfolk filed in, stamping snow from their boots and speaking in low murmurs. Preacher Thompson stood near the pulpit, talking quietly with Carson, the banker. The banker's expensive coat and polished boots seemed to gleam in the lamplight, making Silas's well-worn ranching clothes appear even more humble by comparison. "Quite a crowd you've drawn, McGraw," Carson remarked as they approached. His smile didn't reach his eyes, though I can't imagine what's so pressing it couldn't. "Wait for proper business hours. Truth doesn't keep bankers' hours, Mr. Carson," Silas replied evenly. He turned to address the gathering crowd. "Neighbors, thank you for coming. I won't waste your time." The murmuring died down as Silas withdrew the letters from his coat. His voice carried clearly through the hall. "Yesterday, we discovered documents that changed everything about the water rights dispute. Letters proving my father made a legal agreement with the Ute tribe 18 years ago, granting our ranch access to Eagle Spring." A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Carson's smile vanished. "These letters," Silas continued, holding them up, were witnessed by Preacher Thompson himself. "They show a fair and binding agreement, made in good faith between my father and Chief Running Bear." "Convenient timing," Carson cut in smoothly. "Finding such valuable papers just when your note comes due. Rather suspicious, wouldn't you say, Preacher?" Preacher Thompson stepped forward, adjusting his spectacles. "May I see these letters, Silas?" As the preacher examined the documents, the townsfolk pressed closer. Some faces showed interest, others skepticism. Keisha heard whispers behind her, some doubting, some wondering. "These appear to be genuine," the preacher said, slowly, studying one signature. That is indeed my mark, though it was many years ago. Forgeries, obviously, Carson scoffed. Anyone could have copied your signature, preacher. And conveniently, the other party to this supposed agreement isn't here to verify it, are they? The Ute Council still camps in the North Valley, Silas responded. They could confirm? Oh, yes, let's ask the Indians to support your claim, Carson interrupted with a harsh laugh. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you steal my water rights. They're not your rights to begin with. Kisha spoke up suddenly. Her voice was quiet but firm, tarrying through the now silent hall. These letters prove that. The agreement was made in good faith, witnessed properly, and sealed with honor on both sides. She stepped forward, meeting Carson's cold stare. I found these letters myself, cleaning the barn loft. They were tied with the same string, wrapped in the same oilcloth they've been in for 18 years. The paper's aged, the ink's faded, you can't forge that kind of time. And who exactly are you to make such claims? Carson demanded. Some mail-order bride who failed to find a husband? Why should anyone here trust your word? Kisha felt the sting of his words, but didn't flinch. Because truth speaks for itself, Mr. Carson, those who have eyes to see will see it. A murmur went through the crowd again, but different this time. Old Mrs. Peterson, who'd known Silas's father, nodded slowly. John McGraw was an honest man, she said clearly. If he made an agreement, he'd have done it proper-like. Others began to nod. The blacksmith spoke up. I remember them Ute leaders coming to the ranch back then. I wondered what that was about. Carson's face darkened. This is absurd. You can't honestly be considering some ancient agreement with savages as legally binding. Those savages, as you call them, Silas cut in sharply, kept their word all these years. They've honored the agreement, even after my father's death. The question is, will we do the same? The preacher cleared his throat. These documents appear genuine to me. As a witness to the original agreement, I can attest to that much. The town council will need to review them properly, of course. This meeting is over, Carson snapped, turning on his heel. I'll see you in court, McGraw. He stalked out, letting the door slam behind him, but the damage to his authority was done. People clustered around Silas and the preacher, examining the letters, sharing memories of John McGraw's dealings with the Ute tribe. Kisha stood quietly beside Silas, watching hope slowly replace doubt on their neighbors' faces. Finally, they loaded back into the wagon for the ride home. The morning sun had burned away the frost, but a chill still lingered in the air. They rode in silence for a while, both processing the morning's events. Thank you, Silas said at last. For speaking up. For standing beside me, Keisha nodded, watching the winter-brown fields roll past. Truth needs standing up for, she said simply. But, as the ranch came into view, she felt the weight of Carson's threats settle over them both. The banker wouldn't give up easily. They all knew that. The fight was far from over. They had won the first skirmish, planting seeds of truth in their neighbors' hearts. But spring was still far off, and winter's grip was strong. Only time would tell if those seeds would take root and grow into the justice they sought. The retaliation came before dawn. A harsh pounding on the door jolted everyone awake. One of the ranch hands, young Billy Tucker, stood breathless on the porch, his face flushed from running. Mr. McGraw, they've dammed the creek upstream. His words tumbled out in panic. Saw them working by lantern light, piling rocks and timber. Water's barely trickling through now. Silas grabbed his coat, boots already on his feet. Wake the other hands, he ordered, striding toward the barn. We'll need every man. The pale winter sun revealed the extent of Carson's spite. The creek that sustained their cattle had slowed to a mere trickle, its voice silenced by the illegal dam upstream. In the pasture, cattle lowed plaintively. Clustering around the nearly empty watering troughs, Martha wrung her hands as she watched from the kitchen window. The stock won't last long without water, she murmured. Not in us cold. Kisha stood beside her, mind racing. We'll haul what we can from the downstream pools, she said firmly. Every bucket counts now. The two women gathered every container they could find. Buckets, barrels, even washing tubs. The children helped too, Thomas still weak but determined, carrying small pails between them. Their boots crunched through frozen grass as they made endless trips between the remaining pools and the troughs. Meanwhile, Silas and 5 ranch hands rowed hard upstream, following the creek's winding path. They found Carson's men still working, reinforcing their crude dam with more logs and stones. The water backed up behind it, creating an unnatural pond that belonged in neither law nor nature. That's enough. Silas's voice carried across the water. You're breaking the law, and you know it. The hired men, strangers from outside the territory, barely paused in their work. Their leader, a hard-faced man with a week's growth of beard, spat into the snow. We got our orders, he drawled. Mr. Carson says this water's his now. Papers prove it. Papers built on lies? Silas countered, his horse pawing restlessly beneath him. We have proof of prior rights. Ain't our concern, the man shrugged. We get paid to do a job. We do it. Billy Tucker's young voice cracked with anger. You're killing innocent animals. That ain't right. The leader's hand drifted toward his gun. Back off, boy. This ain't your fight. Silas moved his horse between Billy and the hired men. It's everyone's fight when justice gets twisted, he said quietly. But we won't settle it with bullets. They rode back to the ranch, frustration burning in their guts. The sight that greeted them there both warmed and worried their hearts. Kisha and Martha had organized a water brigade with neighbors who'd heard the news coming to help. Even old Mrs. Peterson was there, directing the children with their small buckets. But the effort was like trying to fill a lake with teacups. The cattle needed more water than they could possibly haul by hand. And in town, Carson's poison spread through whispers and significant looks. Hurt you put him up to. One woman murmured to another outside the mercantile. That mail-order bride, filling his head with wild notions about Indian treaties. Always thought it suspicious how she wormed her way into his home, came the reply. Poor Martha, having to put up with such a schemer. The rumors reached the ranch by supper time, carried by sympathetic friends. Martha's face grew tight as she stirred the stew, shooting uncertain glances at Kisha. The kitchen felt colder somehow, despite the cooking fire's warmth. After the children were abed, voices rose from Silas's study. Kisha paused in the hallway, her arms full of mending, as Martha's worried tones carried through the door. I know you want to believe in her, Silas, Martha was saying, but you have to admit the timing is strange. She appears out of nowhere, finds these convenient letters, and suddenly you're risking everything we have. That's not fair, Martha. Silas's voice sounded weary. She found those letters by honest work, cleaning where we'd neglected to look for years. But what if that's what she wanted us to think? What if she planted them there, waiting for the right moment? Carson says Carson. Silas cut in sharply. Since when do we trust anything that Snake says? I'm just saying we need to be careful, Martha insisted. She's a stranger, Silas. We know nothing about her, really. And now the whole ranch is in danger because of her discovery. A heavy silence followed. When Silas spoke again, his voice held a note of uncertainty that pierced Kisha's heart. I want to believe in her, he said slowly. Everything in me says she's honest. But if I'm wrong, ... If you're wrong, we lose everything, Martha finished softly. The ranch, our home, everything Father built. Kisha didn't wait to hear more. She retreated silently to her room, the unfinished mending clutched to her chest like a shield. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She'd shed enough tears on that first day at the train station. She wouldn't waste more now, but as she sat in her dark room, watching the moon rise over the thirsting land, the weight of loneliness pressed down harder than ever. She thought she'd found a place here, a family who might trust her, might even come to love her. Now it seemed she'd only found another way to be left behind. The ranch slept fitfully that night, its people and animals both troubled by thirst and worry. Even the wind seemed restless, moaning around the eaves like a lost soul seeking home. Kisha lay awake, listening to the cattle's distressed lowing. Each sound an accusation against her presence here. Dawn brought no relief. The creek still ran thin, the cattle grew more desperate, and the weight of Carson's manipulation hung over everything like a heavy frost. Kisha rose early, determined to prove her worth through work if nothing else. She joined Martha at the well, neither woman quite meeting the other's eyes as they began another day of hauling water. The sun climbed higher, watching their struggle with indifferent eyes. Horses whinnied nervously in their stalls, sensing the tension in the air. The cattle crowded the fences, their thirst making them bold and unpredictable. And through it all, Kisha felt the growing distance between herself and the family she'd begun to love. Each silent hour another stone and the wall being built between them. She caught Silas watching her once, his face troubled and uncertain. The look in his eyes, that careful blend of doubt and regret, hurt worse than any physical blow. She turned away quickly, focusing on her work, pretending she hadn't seen. But the image stayed with her, another wound to carry in her already burdened heart. As evening approached, more neighbors arrived with water barrels in their wagons, each help a small victory against Carson's cruelty. But Keisha noticed how some of them looked at her sideways, whispering behind their hands. The poison of Carson's lies had spread far and fast, turning even kind hearts suspicious. She worked until her arms ached and her back screamed for rest, hauling water alongside Martha and the children. The physical pain was almost welcome. It gave her something to focus on besides the ache in her heart. But she couldn't ignore the way Martha's silence had grown colder, or how Thomas and Sarah no longer chattered freely around her. Trust, once cracked, proved harder to mend than any broken cup or torn shirt. And as the sun set on their first day without proper water, Kisha realized that Carson had struck a far deeper blow than merely damming the creek. He'd planted seeds of doubt that threatened to choke out the fragile roots she'd begun to grow in this place. The cattle would survive another day or two on the water they managed to haul. But Kisha wondered if the same could be said for the bonds of trust that had been forming between her and the McGraws. Some wounds, she knew from bitter experience, ran deeper than thirst. And some droughts could parch the heart long after the rains returned. The moon cast long shadows through Kisha's window as she knelt beside her trunk, each creak of the floorboards a reminder of her unwelcome presence. Her hands trembled as she folded her simple dresses, tucking them away with the same care she'd once used to pack her hopeful bride clothes. The trunk's hinges whispered sadly, like they knew this wasn't how things were supposed to end. A tear splashed onto her best Sunday dress, but she wiped it away quickly. She wouldn't soil these clothes with self-pity. She'd learned long ago that tears didn't change hard truths, and the truth here was clear as creek water. Her presence threatened everything the McGraws had built. The cattle's distressed lowing drifted through her window, each sound an accusation. Their thirst was her fault, wasn't it? If she hadn't found those letters, if she hadn't encouraged Silas to challenge Carson, the ranch wouldn't be suffering now. Martha's worried words from earlier echoed in her mind. Sharp as thorns, Keisha pulled out a sheet of paper and her pencil stub, smoothing the paper against her Bible. The words came slowly. Each one weighted with regret. Dear Mr. McGraw, I cannot express enough gratitude for your kindness to a stranger. You offered shelter when others showed only scorn, and your family welcomed me with open hearts. That is why I must go. I won't be the cause of your ranch's ruin or your family's pain. The water rights dispute is yours to fight, without the shadow of suspicion my presence brings. Please tell Thomas and Sarah I'll keep them in my prayers. And thank Martha for teaching me what a true home feels like. Even if only for a little while. May God bless and keep you all. Kisha Whitfield. She folded the letter carefully, pressing it flat with hands that had grown strong from ranch work. Setting it on her pillow, she looked around the small room that had become her sanctuary. The patchwork quilt Martha had lent her. The tin wash basin where Sarah liked to perch and chat while Kisha braided her hair. Thomas's wooden horse carving, given to her after she'd nursed him through his fever. Each item held a memory she'd have to leave behind. But better to leave now with some dignity than wait until doubt poisoned every interaction. She'd seen too many suspicious glances today, heard too many whispered conversations stop when she entered a room. The night passed slowly as Keisha prepared for departure. She packed her few belongings with practiced efficiency, leaving behind anything the McGraws had given her. The dress Martha had helped her alter. The warm shawl Silas had insisted she take on cold mornings. These weren't hers to keep. They belonged to the life she'd briefly borrowed, like a book that had to be returned to its shelf. As false dawn began to pale the sky, Kisha heard movement in the kitchen. Martha would be starting breakfast soon. If she was going to leave without a scene, it had to be now. She lifted her trunk, lighter now than when she'd arrived, though her heart felt heavier, and crept down the stairs. But Thomas and Sarah were already awake, huddled in their nightclothes by the front door. Sarah's eyes went wide at the sight of Kisha's trunk. "You're leaving?" Sarah's voice quavered. "But you can't." "Who'll help me with my reading?" Thomas stood straighter, trying to look grown up despite his trembling chin. "Is it because of what people are saying?" "Because Pa says not to listen to mean talk." "Oh, children." Kisha set down her trunk and knelt before them, her resolve wavering as Sarah threw thin arms around her neck. "Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices to protect the people they care about, but you're protecting us by staying," Thomas insisted. "You help with everything. You make Ma smile again. You showed Pa those important letters. Those letters, ... double quotes Kisha's voice caught. Those letters have brought nothing but trouble to your family. And now with the water cut off, ... that's not your fault," Sarah said fiercely, her grip tightening. "If that mean Mr. Carson's fault?" "Everyone knows that," Kisha stroked Sarah's hair, remembering all the mornings she'd braided it while they talked about school and dreams and the future. A future she couldn't be part of anymore. "Sometimes it doesn't matter whose fault something is," she explained gently. "What matters is fixing what's broken. And right now, your family needs to focus on saving the ranch without worrying about ... complications. You're not a complication," Thomas protested. "Your family," the words struck Kisha's heart like a physical blow. She had to steel herself against them, against the temptation to believe she could belong here. "You're very kind to say that. But I need to go now, before everyone else wakes up. It'll be easier that way." Sarah began to cry softly, and Thomas's face screwed up with the effort of holding back his own tears. Kisha hugged them both close, memorizing the feel of their small bodies against hers, the scent of soap and sunshine that clung to their hair. "I'll pray for you every day," she whispered. "And I'll never forget how you made me feel welcome here." She had to pry Sarah's fingers loose gently, each small sob like a knife to her heart. Thomas helped her lift her trunk into the wagon, his movements stiff with hurt pride. As she climbed onto the seat, Sarah darted forward one last time, pressing something into her hand, a small rag doll she'd helped the girl make just last week. "So, you won't forget us," Sarah choked out. Kisha clutched the doll to her chest, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. She nodded once, then flicked the reins. The wagon creaked into motion, carrying her away from the second chance she'd dared to hope for. Behind her, the children's crying grew fainter, mixing with the morning wind's mournful song. The sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink as Kisha guided the wagon down the familiar road to town. Each hoofbeat seemed to echo the word, "Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye." Back at the ranch, Silas descended the stairs, drawn by the unusual early morning sounds. He found Martha in the kitchen, staring at an empty chair, Kisha's chair, with a strange expression. "Where's everyone?" he asked, noting the quiet house. Martha wordlessly handed him the letter she'd found on Kisha's pillow. Silas read it once, then again, his face growing pale. The paper crumpled in his tightening grip as understanding dawned. "When?" he demanded. "How long ago did she leave?" "Must have been just before dawn," Martha said softly. "But children are out front still, crying their hearts out." Silas strode to the window. Sure enough, Thomas and Sarah huddled together on the porch steps, their small shoulders shaking. Something twisted in his chest at the sight. He hadn't seen them cry like this since their father passed. "She can't have gotten far," he muttered, already reaching for his hat. "Not with a wagon on those roads." Silas ... double quotes Martha's voice held a warning note. "Maybe this is for the best. With everything that's happening ... Everything that's happening is exactly why she needs to stay," Silas cut in. "She's the one who found those letters. She's the one who gave us hope of fighting Carson. And more than that ... He gestured to the children outside. Look what she means to this family. Martha's expression softened. I know. I was wrong to doubt her. The way she works without complaint, how she cares for the children. No schemer could fake that kind of love. Silas was already heading for the door, his boots thundering on the wooden floor. I'm going after her. Have breakfast ready when we return. He didn't wait for Martha's response. Outside, he paused only long enough to tell the children, I'm bringing her back, before swinging onto his horse. The morning air was crisp with frost as he spurred toward town. Praying he would catch her before she reached the station. His heart pounded with each hoofbeat, his mind racing through all the things he should have said yesterday. He should have defended her more strongly. Should have noticed how Carson's lies were affecting her. Should have told her how much she'd come to mean to them all. Please, he whispered into the wind. Please don't let me be too late. The morning train whistled in the distance as Keisha settled onto the familiar wooden crate, her heart as heavy as the snow-laden clouds above. How fitting that she should end up right where she started, alone at the depot. Fat snowflakes caught in her shawl, dampening her carpet bag and the few possessions inside. Poor thing, a woman whispered, hurrying past. Twice abandoned now. Serves her right, came another voice, stirring up trouble with those Indian letters. Mr. Carson strode across the platform, his leather portfolio tucked securely under one arm. He tipped his hat with mock courtesy, letting her glimpse the foreclosure papers within. Good day, Miss Whitfield. Wise choice. Leaving before the sheriff arrives. Kisha's fingers tightened around her worn Bible, its pages marked with pressed flowers from the McGraw garden. Lord, she whispered, grant me strength to bear this trial. Suddenly, the depot door burst open. Silas stood there, chest heaving, snow dusting his broad shoulders. His eyes found hers instantly. Kisha, he called out, crossing the platform in long strides. Don't go, please. I only bring trouble to your family, she said softly. No. He knelt before her crate. My pride and mistrust were the sin here. I let doubt poison what God brought to our door. Can you forgive me? Tears spilled down Kisha's cheeks. I was so afraid, she confessed. Afraid of losing another home, another family. Silas offered Kisha his arm, and together they strode through the snow toward the white-steepled church. Inside, lamplight cast long shadows as townspeople filled the wooden pews. Mr. Carson stood smugly at the front, his foreclosure papers spread before the preacher. The heavy doors creaked open. Chief Tawan entered, his son beside him, carrying a leather pouch that drew every eye. The room fell silent as the elderly chief approached the altar with dignified steps. My people remember? Tawan spoke clearly. McGraw father kept sacred word on waters. This banker broke trust. He withdrew carefully preserved documents that matched the letters Kisha had found. The preacher's hands trembled as he read the agreements aloud. These validate everything, he declared. Mr. Carson's face turned ashen as whispers of shock rippled through the congregation. Mr. Carson's face reddened as he jabbed his finger at the documents. This is preposterous. I'll take this to the circuit judge. But the townsfolk were already shaking their heads. Several stood up, including old Tom Wheeler from the Mercantile. Ain't right what you done, Carson. These papers prove it. The preacher's voice rang out firm and clear. Mr. Carson, you will sign over the water rights. Now, with trembling fingers. Carson scratched his signature on the papers. Several townspeople approached Kisha, heads bowed. We were wrong about you, miss, Martha Jones whispered. Silas reached for Kisha's hand, holding it tight, before all gathered. Her fingers curled into his, warm and sure. The gesture spoke volumes. They stood together now, their bond plain for all to see. That evening, golden lamplights spilled across the church's wooden floors. Silas turned to Kisha, his voice soft but certain. Stay with me, not as our guest, but as my wife. If you'll have me. Tears sparkled in Kisha's eyes as she nodded, joy breaking across her face like sunrise. The preacher stood before them, Bible in hand, while Martha dabbed her eyes with her handkerchief. Her children fidgeted excitedly in the front pew. Chief Tawan and his family sat dignified in their finest clothes, offering gentle smiles. As hymns filled the sacred space, the chief rose to bestow a traditional blessing, speaking of shared waters and lasting friendship between their peoples. "I do," Keisha whispered, her journey from that lonely depot crate to this moment of covenant complete. The evening settled soft and peaceful over the McGraw Ranch. Gentle lamplight spilled from the windows, casting a warm glow across the wraparound porch. The creek, now flowing free and clear, sang its sweet melody through the gathering dusk. Kisha sat in the old rocking chair, Martha's youngest sleeping against her shoulder. Silas settled beside her, his weathered hand covering hers on the chair's arm. Inside, children's laughter echoed through the house like music. Her gaze drifted to the distant hills. Remembering that cold depot crate where her journey began? "Second chances are his sweetest miracles," she whispered to the sleeping child. Silas leaned close, grateful beyond words for the woman who had transformed their home from lost to light dot. If today's story reminded you of the quiet strength of love, I'd love to see you again. Subscribe, and tomorrow we'll meet right here where love speaks softly and stays.